In this chapter, we're going to talk about string methods. As you may recall, a string, which is widely used in Java, is an object that represents a sequence of characters. It is a great way to store information. Because character strings are so vital to programming, Java dedicated an entire class to them. This is great news for us because the string class provides a lot of useful methods to help us perform operations on strings and data manipulation. In this lesson, we will go over several string methods, and these are length, concat, equals, index of, char at, substring, to uppercase, to lowercase. If we have a look at the instructions, it says run the code in the code editor. There are three string methods used in this program. We'll learn about them later, but can you guess what some of them do? Well, let's have a look at our program here. So we have a file called hello.java. And inside this file, we have a class called hello world. And inside the class, we have our main method, where we have a variable whose name is str, and the type of the data that this variable is storing is a string. Now we have the equal sign, and we have a piece of text that is enclosed in double quotes. And of course, we end it with a semicolon. Now, on lines 9, 11, and 13, we have system.out.println, which is going to display something to us on the screen. And here we are accessing some methods that are available to our variable. And because this variable is of type string, so it's an object of type string, we're using the name of the variable, the name of the object, to access some of the methods that are available in our string class. And these methods, we don't see them defined anywhere in here because they come with the Java programming language. Okay, so let's try and guess what each of these system.out.println statements do. So for example, here I think it will be fairly easy to understand that by accessing the length method, we can expect to get back the length of the string that we're storing. Okay, so we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because we're counting the white space as well, so the spaces. So we had 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I think we would get on the screen, so the result of this code that appears on line 9 would display to us on the screen number 13, because this would be the length of our string. Now, substring, and it gives us a number here for. I think this will print us something of type string as well that might start at index 4. So if we have 0, because if you remember, counting in programming in general starts at 0. When we talk about index, of course. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think what it will give us, the result would be, so here it will give us everything from comma all the way to the end. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. Okay, so I think this is what we're going to get, okay, on the screen, but we will see. And then system.out.println on line 13, we have string to uppercase. So it's fairly intuitive. To uppercase would mean that whatever the value that our variable is storing is going to turn into uppercase. So all of them. Okay, so it would be hello, a comma, a space, and then world. and then an exclamation mark at the end, but all in uppercase, as opposed to it being written like this, like it was declared initially in the variable. Okay, so let's try and run it and we will see. Okay, so we see here 13, which was correct here. The substring actually returns O, so the last here, this bit that is highlighted right now on the screen is the result of the code on line 11. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So it starts at 4 including. Okay. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Everything from index 4 onwards. Okay. So it should be like this. And then of course on line 13, the output from this code on line 13, it was hello world in capital letters. Okay, let's move on. Let's have a look at the string method called length. So in Java, the length string method returns the length or the total number of characters of a string. Suppose we have a string called str, just like we've seen in the previous example. So suppose we have a string called str.length, so we're accessing this length method, would return its length, so the length of the value stored in str. Let's take a look at the code here in the example. So the length here would be, so 12 will be printed because string has 12 characters. Okay, so these would be 12 characters in total, including the white space or the space here in between the words. In theory, the length of a string is the same as the Unicode units of the string. For example, escape sequences such as this one count as only one character. So this one would count only as one character, and this would represent on something written on a new line. Okay, so say if we had hello and then this backslash and the letter N, then followed by world, we wouldn't have them printed all on one line, but we would have hello, and then on the other line we would have a world as well. If we have a look at the instructions, it says Twitter allows users to post tweets with a character limit. They capture the message the user enters as a string, count the length of the message, and use its length to decide whether or not to let the user post a message. The limit is 280 characters. Let's check tweet. So this is a variable, which is here. Let's see if our variable follows Twitter's policy. Print out the number of characters in the tweet using the length method. So what we can do is to use the system.out.println, and then we take the name of our variable, which is tweet, and then we use the dot notation to access the length method. Of course, we end it with a semicolon. And now if we run it, we should get the number of characters in our string, okay, or the length of our string. And we have 83 displayed as output. We're going to move on to the next lesson. Now, the new method that we're going to have a look at is concat. The concat method concatenates one string to the end of another string. Concatenation is the operation of joining two strings together. Suppose we have a string called str1 and another string called str2. Using str1.concat, and to our concat method we pass it this parameter str2, would return str1 with str2 appended to the end of it. If we have a look at the example here, we have a string, so a variable of type string whose name is name and its value is code. And then it says name equals to name dot concat. So it accesses the concat method, and then it passes as an argument to our concat method. It passes a value which is going to be appended or joined to the end of this initial code here. Okay, and then it would print out the name again on the screen. Codecademy would be printed. In the code block above, we change the value of name by reassigning it with a new value. However, concat doesn't actually change the value of the original string. Suppose we do something slightly different. So if we only say we have a variable called name and is of type string and it holds this value, code, and then if we say name.concat academy, and then if we were to print on the screen name, then we would only get code. Okay, so simply because we would just call this, which is code, yeah, we're trying to append this, but we're not storing it anywhere. Okay, so of course the value that name stores in this case, so in this example, would be still code. Now, looking at the instructions, it says store your first name in the first name, so this is going to be a variable, and your last name in last name. Print out your full name using concat. Okay, so we have here a class, we have the main method, and inside here we have declared two variables, and we have to put some names here. I'm gonna put Alex to be short. Let's say Java. And then if we wanted to display on the screen the full name using the concat method, we would say system.out.println, and we would say first name dot concat, so we're accessing the concat method, and then in here we would say last name. Okay, so last name would be passed as a as an argument to our concat method. We're gonna run it, and we're getting Alex Java. Let's go to the next lesson. Now we're gonna have a look at the equals method with objects such as strings. We can't use primitive equality operator equals equals to check for equality between two strings. To test equality with strings, we use a built-in method called equals. We've seen a similar example when we talked, I believe, in the classes and objects lesson. Now, if we have a look at the example, we have a variable called flavor, and it has this value, mango, and we have another variable called flavor2, and it has the value of peach. And then we're printing on the screen flavor dot, so with the dot, with the equal, with the help of the dot operator, we're gonna access the equals method, and we're passing it mango, and this way it goes and it checks what's your value, flavor 1. Well, in flavor 1 we have stored mango, and then the equals compares this value to this value, and this is how we compare objects, including strings, because a string is an object. So in this case it will print true, okay, because this expression gets evaluated. This is gonna result into being true, and then we print this true on the screen, okay. Now if we have a look at this line here, it says system.out.println flavor2 equals mango. So it checks, it goes and takes the value that is stored in the flavor2 variable, which is peach. And then it says compare the value stored in this variable with this value. And this will print false. Well, for obvious reasons, because flavor2 is peach and not mango. So therefore, these two values are gonna are different, and this whole expression is gonna evaluate to false. As a side note, there's also an equals ignore case method that compares two strings without considering upper or lower case. So in, for example here, if instead of mango with capital M, we would have, it would start with a small letter. And if they were compared with this, with the help of this method, equals ignore case, it would still result into a true result. It will still evaluate to a true result, simply because equals ignore case would be a method that compares two strings without considering whether they're uppercase or lowercase. In the instructions, it says in password.java, which is our file, there's a password, so there's a variable called password with a value of this value, okay, here. Use equals to print out whether is the same as another string. Okay, so let's do system.out.println, and inside here we're gonna say password. We're gonna access the method equals, and then inside here we're gonna give it some value. Okay, so it's gonna compare this one to this one. Of course, on the screen we're gonna get false because obviously these two values are not identical, are not the same. We're gonna move on to the next lesson. We're gonna have a look at the index of. So if we want to know the index of the first occurrence of a character in a string, we can use the index of method on a string. So remember that the indices in Java starts from 0. So we have a variable called letters of type string, of course, and we have some letters in here. And then we want to print on the screen index of C. So we want to find out at which index the first instance, the first occurrence of letter C appears in this text, because we can have more than one occurrence of the same letter in a piece of text. Now, if we have a look at or if we remember the fact that in Java indices start at 0, we will have 0, 1, 2. So the result of this output here would be 2. Because although C is the third letter in the English alphabet, it is located in the second index of the string. Now, suppose we want to know the index of the first occurrence of an entire substring. The index of instance method can also return where the substring begins, or the index of the first character in the substring. Okay, so what it means is, say for example, we have not only a character, maybe we have an entire word. In this case, it's going to be EFG, okay, or this sequence of characters. And we want to know where does this segment starts in our variable, okay? So it's EFG, it would be this one here. Where does it start? So index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4, okay? So this would output 4 because EFG starts at index 4. If the index of doesn't find what it's looking for, it will return a -1. So this is very important to remember, because there's going to be a time where we can make use of this -1 here in the logic of our program. Okay. So now it says in our file called morsecode.java, there's a string named code that has some funny characters. So we have a variable whose name is code of type string, and we have a sequence of dashes and dots and forward slashes in there. So find the index where the substring this begins, okay, which by the way means apparently eat, the word eat in Morse code, okay. So let's see. We want to use again the system.out.println. Okay, and then inside here we want to take the name of our variable, and we're gonna use the dot notation to access the method. Okay, so index of, and inside here we're gonna put this sequence that I got it from here. Okay, and it says it starts at index 87. I wonder how many characters do we have then in total. Let's see, let's copy this, and we're gonna say length. Okay, and let's try and run this. So we have 110, well, we have 111 characters in total, because if you remember, the index starts at 0. And at index 87, so the index 87 is the starting point of this sequence, okay? Now we're gonna move on to the next one. We're gonna have a look at the char at or car at method. The char at method returns the character located at a string specific index. So we have again a variable that stores this value, and then it we take its name, so the name of this variable, and we access using the dot notation. We access the char at method, and it's gonna give us, well, we're gonna pass it the a number, okay, and what this code is gonna do is gonna go exactly to index number 2, okay, so 0, 1, 2, okay. So this code here, system.out.println this, it would output E, because that's what's at index 2, exactly what we decided here, okay. Once again, indices start at 0. Suppose we try return the character located at index 4. It would produce an error because index 4 is out of Straight's STR's range. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, okay. So of course the length or the maximum index that this variable is gonna have is actually 3. So if we're gonna say, instead of 2 here, if we were to put a 4, we would get an error because index 4 would be out of range, okay. And then it says in the instructions, in initials.java, which is this file, add your first and your last name. Let's say, okay, we're gonna run it. And then it says print out the initials of the first name and the last name, okay. So the initials, system.out.println, okay, and we would say first name dot char at 0, and I'm gonna copy this and put it on the next line and do the same with the second variable. So we should get printed on the screen an A, so the letter A and the letter J. Okay, and this is what we get as an output. The substring method. So there may be times when we only want a part of a string. In such case, we may want to extract a substring from an actual original string. The substring method does exactly that. For example, if we have a variable called line and we have some text in this variable, then if we were to print system.out.println line, so the name of the variable, and then we use the dot notation to access the substring method, and we give it a number here, and this number would represent the index where we want our new substring to start from, whichever that might be located, in this case at at index 23. So this code here would output constellations wrong, because that's what begins at index 23 and ends at the end of line. So this would be at the end of the line, okay? The substring begins with a character at the specified index, but extends all the way to the end of the string. Suppose we want a substring at the middle of the string. We can include two arguments with this string method. For example, if we have the same variable as above, and it stores some text, if we call system.out.println line, so the name of our variable, dot substring, but in this case we're passing in not only one like we've seen above, but we're passing it two numbers. One would be where it starts, okay, and the second one where it ends. So it would output, so this code would output constellations, because that's the substring that begins at index 23 and ends at index 38. Okay. The instructions, it says change the arguments of the line substring, so here, so that it prints out heavens instead. Okay, so let's run this and just see what it prints. It prints initially constellations, okay, and what we want to do, what we need to do, is to change the arguments here, okay, so then it starts at whatever index this might be, and it ends right here, okay. So this is what we want to have printed on the screen. So let's start counting. We have index 0, 1, 2, 3, so 4. This is a 4. Okay. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, it looks like we have to, it's gonna go up to, but not including. So this has to be 11. Okay, because if I'm gonna try and just increase the font of this one a little bit. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is where it starts. So we've given it a 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah, 11. So we want to start at 4, which is here, and we want to end here, which is 11, okay? So it's gonna go all the way up to, but not including. I'm gonna run it again, and this time it looks like we're getting indeed the result that they were asking us for, okay? Okay, now we're gonna have a look at the methods to uppercase and to lowercase. There will be times when we have a word in a case other than what we need it in. Luckily, Java has a couple of string methods to help us out. So to uppercase, which returns the string value converted to uppercase, and then the lowercase, which returns the string value converted to lowercase. So for example, if we have a variable called input of type string that holds this value, if we are calling the to uppercase on our input and whatever this returns, so whatever this gets evaluated to is stored in upper, then the value stored in this upper is going to be cricket all in capital letters, okay? And the same with this one. If we call it the if we call the to lower case method on our input, and then we store that into a new variable of type string called lower, then the value stored in this lower variable is going to be cricket with small letters, because this is what to lowercase method does. A good use of this functionality is to ensure consistency of the data you store in a database. Making sure all of the data you get from a user is lowercase before you store it in your database will make it easier to search through it later. If we have a look at the instructions, in the hashtag.java, use lowercase method to print out a lowercase version of the hashtag, okay? So again, system.out.println hashtag dot to lower case. So if we're gonna print this on the screen, of course we're gonna get this whole thing in small letters, okay? Hashtag, I missed a letter there. So there you go, 100 days of code. Of course, whatever is a string, the numbers can't be converted to uppercase or lowercase. Okay, so in the review section of the string methods, it says we have learned some of the string methods that come with the string class: length, concat, index of, char at, equals, ignore case, substring, to uppercase or to lowercase. Remember that the substring gives us, for example, if we're only going to pass it one argument, it's going to give us it's going to give us the result, well, a substring, a new segment of the initial value stored in the variable that starts at whatever index we give it all the way to the end, okay? And then index of this one, we're going to pass it a character, and it's going to tell us where we find that. So when we call the index of method, we're going to give it a character or a letter, and it's going to tell us at which index in the variable that letter is found. And the char at, we're going to pass it an index, so an actual number, and it's going to tell us what value or what letter is stored at that index.